The yellowed envelope reached Manny Pacquiao's hands on an ordinary morning, delivered by one of his staff members. Inside, a handwritten letter in Tagalog, signed by Tiago Lumban, a name he hadn't heard in over a decade. The old caretaker of Malungon Gym, where it all began, wrote with trembling handwriting about the definitive closure of the place that had been his first home in the boxing world. The letter mentioned that trainer Rodolfo Nabuong had passed away 2 years earlier, taking with him not only a life dedicated to boxing, but also the last thread of hope that kept the gym functioning. Tiago explained that he had tried to keep the place open out of loyalty to the old master, but lack of resources and community disinterest had made the mission impossible. Now, at 73 years old, he was preparing to lock the doors permanently. Manny felt his chest tighten as he read each word. Rodolfo Nabuong had been more than a trainer. He had been a father to dozens of young people lost on the streets of General Santos City. His death represented the end of an era, and the gym's closure meant that hundreds of young people would be left without the opportunity he himself had received decades earlier. Without telling anyone, Manny cancelled his commitments and drove alone to General Santos City. The familiar streets seemed smaller than in his childhood memories, but they carried the same vibrant energy as always. Children ran barefoot through the alleys, their laughter echoing like sounds from a past he knew intimately. When he finally spotted Malungon Gym, his heart raced in a way that not even the biggest fights of his career had managed to provoke. The simple concrete building, which once buzzed with activity, now stood silent and abandoned. The windows were boarded up with plywood, and wild vegetation was beginning to take over the exterior walls. Manny parked the car and remained for long minutes observing the abandoned gym. The faded sign was still visible: Malungon Gym, Boxing and Discipline. Below, in smaller letters, was written, "In memory of Rodolfo Nabuong," a recent addition that Tiago had made after the trainer's death. The main door was locked with a rusty padlock, but Manny managed to find a side entrance that Tiago had mentioned in the letter. The interior was plunged into melancholic darkness, with sunbeams filtering through the cracks in the wood covering the windows. The smell of mold and abandonment contrasted dramatically with his memories of the place always being clean and organized. The ring that once occupied the center of the space had been dismantled, leaving only marks on the floor, indicating where the posts used to be. Manny walked to that exact spot and closed his eyes, allowing memories to flow freely. He could almost hear Rodolfo's hoarse voice shouting instructions, could smell the sweat and determination that permeated every corner of that sacred place. There, in that now empty and silent space, he had learned that boxing wasn't just about brute force, but about discipline, respect, and the ability to get up after every fall. He remembered the exhausting training sessions under the scorching heat, when there was no air conditioning or modern equipment, just the iron will to overcome his limitations and the poverty that surrounded him. The walls still held some old posters, now faded and torn. Manny could identify fragments of names he knew, young boxers who had trained there and followed different paths. Each crack in the wall seemed to tell a story. Each moisture stain was a memory of nights when he slept in the gym itself, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible. While exploring the darker corners of the abandoned gym, Manny heard cautious footsteps behind him. He turned and saw an elderly man, with shoulders bent by the weight of years, watching him with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. The man leaned on a simple wooden cane, and his hands showed the marks of decades of hard work. It was Tiago Lumban, the gym's former caretaker, whom Manny instantly recognized despite the years that had passed. Tiago had been a constant presence during his early training years, always there to open and close the gym, to clean sweat from the ring, and to offer words of encouragement when training became especially difficult. The old caretaker approached slowly, leaning on his cane with each step. His eyes, still lucid despite his age, filled with tears as he recognized the young man he had watched grow and transform into a world legend. He had followed every victory through television, every title won, every moment of glory that elevated not only Manny, but all Filipino pride. Tiago began talking about the gym's final years, about how Rodolfo's death had left an impossible void to fill. He told about the last young boxers who tried to train there, about equipment that broke and was never repaired, about dreams that vanished along with the deterioration of the facilities. Emotion overwhelmed Manny as he listened to accounts of how Tiago had continued caring for the place, even without receiving salary, moved only by his love for boxing and loyalty to the deceased master. The old man had sacrificed his own financial stability to keep Rodolfo's memory alive, even when everyone else had given up. Tiago guided Manny through the emotional wreckage of the gym, leaning on his cane but walking with renewed determination. They stopped in front of a wall where height marks measuring young boxers. Growth over the years was still visible. Manny found his own mark, made when he was only 14, right below Rodolfo's name written in pencil. The caretaker told about Isagani de los Santos, a young man who had started training there at 13, just months before Rodolfo's death. The boy came from a family even poorer than Manny's and saw boxing as the only opportunity to escape the streets where violence and drugs consumed so many promising youth. Now, at 15, Isagani worked in a mechanic shop, but Tiago knew he still dreamed of returning to the ring. Isagani's story was just one among many that Tiago kept in his memory. He spoke about Maria Esperanza, one of the few girls who insisted on training boxing despite prejudices, and how she had abandoned her studies to work in a factory when the gym closed. Each name mentioned was accompanied by a special gleam in the old caretaker's eyes, as if each dreaming young person were a grandchild he had lost. Manny felt the weight of responsibility growing in his chest. He had managed to escape that cycle of poverty and limitations, but so many others remained trapped in the same circumstances he knew so well. Luck, talent, and hard work had combined to create his unique trajectory. But how many other potential Mannys had been lost due to lack of opportunities? Tiago showed Manny a small cabinet where he still kept some local competition trophies, medals that represented modest but significant achievements for young people who rarely had reasons to celebrate. Among the objects was a framed photo of Rodolfo, surrounded by his pupils, including a teenage Manny with eyes bright with determination. When night fell over General Santos City, Manny found himself sitting on the floor of the abandoned gym next to Tiago, sharing a conversation that would change both their lives. The old caretaker had prepared a small snack with the little he possessed, insisting on sharing his humble meal with the world champion, who had once been just another hungry boy with dreams too big for his reality. Tiago's words echoed in Manny's mind like bells from a distant church. The zeal and devotion with which the old man still spoke about Rodolfo and the young people who had passed through there revealed a passion that transcended any material reward. Tiago hadn't just taken care of a gym. He had been a guardian of dreams, protector of hopes, and witness to transformations that happened one glove at a time. Manny began to understand that his journey hadn't ended when he conquered all possible titles or accumulated unimaginable fortunes. In fact, his true purpose might just be beginning there, in that ruined place that represented both the end and the beginning of a new phase. A champion's greatness wasn't measured only by victories in the ring, but by the ability to elevate others to the same level. The night's silence was filled by the sounds of the city that never completely slept. Manny could hear echoes of young voices in nearby streets, probably teenagers facing the same difficulties he had known. Each laugh, each distant shout, each sound of hurried footsteps on the sidewalk was a reminder that life continued with its challenges and possibilities. Tiago fell asleep leaning against a wall, exhausted by the day's emotion and years of hard work. Manny remained awake, watching the man who had dedicated his life to honoring his master's memory. There was true greatness, the ability to find purpose and dignity in loyalty, to maintain hope even when all evidence suggested giving up. Dawn brought a clarity that Manny hadn't felt in years. While Tiago still slept, he walked through the gym's wreckage with an architect's eyes, visualizing possibilities where others saw only ruins. Each cracked wall could be rebuilt. Each boarded window could let light in again. Each abandoned corner could once again echo with the sounds of young people training and dreaming. Manny began making discreet phone calls, contacting trusted people who could help transform his vision into reality. He didn't want publicity or recognition. He just wanted that place to return to what it had always been, a sanctuary for young people who needed to believe in themselves. Each contact made was carefully chosen to ensure the project maintained its original essence. When Tiago woke up, he found Manny measuring spaces and noting details in an improvised notebook. The old caretaker observed with growing curiosity, walking slowly with his cane, not daring to ask about the plans that were clearly forming in the champion's mind. There was a different energy in the air, a feeling that something important was about to happen. Manny explained his intentions simply and directly. He wanted to restore the gym and return it to the community, but with a special condition. Tiago would be not only the caretaker, but the general supervisor of activities, responsible for ensuring that each young person who entered there would be treated with the same care and attention that Rodolfo dedicated to his pupils. Emotion overwhelmed the old man, who initially couldn't believe what he was hearing. After years caring for an abandoned place, the possibility of seeing it rise from the ashes seemed too impossible to be real. But Manny's determined eyes and the firmness of his words gradually convinced Tiago that this wasn't just a passing dream, but a real promise of renewal. During the following weeks, Manny discreetly organized the complete restoration of Malungon Gym. He hired local workers, prioritizing people from the community itself who needed job opportunities. Each aspect of the renovation was carefully planned to maintain the place's original essence, respecting Rodolfo's memory and all the young people who had trained there over the years. Tiago supervised the work with an energy that surprised everyone. Although he still depended on his cane to walk long distances, motivation had returned a special gleam to his eyes. One of the local carpenters, touched by the old caretaker's dedication, carved a new cane from noble wood as a gift, symbol of the renewal happening in their lives. The new ring was installed exactly in the same location where Manny had thrown his first punches as a boxer. The equipment acquired was professional quality, but the environment maintained the simplicity and authenticity that made that place special. There were no unnecessary luxuries or exaggerated decorations, just what was essential for talented young people to develop their skills. Manny insisted that the renovation be completed without any media coverage. He wanted the surprise to be complete, for the community to discover the renovated gym naturally and organically. His greatest satisfaction wouldn't come from spotlights or public recognition, but from the genuine joy of seeing dreaming young people having access to the same opportunities that had transformed his own life. Throughout the entire process, a special decision was made. The gym would be renamed Rodolfo Nabuang Gym, in permanent tribute to the master who had dedicated his life to forming champions. Tiago cried upon seeing the new sign being installed, knowing that his mentor's memory was finally receiving the recognition it deserved. On the day of the silent reopening, Manny arrived at the gym before dawn, accompanied only by Tiago. They opened the renovated doors and turned on all the lights, revealing a space that was simultaneously familiar and completely transformed. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the aroma of new leather from gloves and equipment, creating an atmosphere of infinite possibilities. The first young people arrived by chance, attracted by the lights and curiosity to see what had happened to the old abandoned gym. Among them was Isagani de los Santos, now 15 years old, accompanied by some friends who shared his passion for boxing. The surprise and joy on their faces were the first real reward Manny received for all his investment. Tiago assumed his role as supervisor with impressive naturalness, leaning on his new noble wood cane while explaining basic rules and introducing equipment to the young visitors. His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke about discipline, respect, and dedication, values that had been the foundation of everything Rodolfo had taught in that place. Manny remained in the background, discreetly observing as more young people arrived at the gym. He didn't identify himself as responsible for the renovation, preferring to be just another spectator of the magic that happened when dreams were given a new opportunity to flourish. Seeing those eyes shining with renewed hope was worth more than any world title won. When he finally said goodbye, Manny left specific instructions for Tiago to continue caring for the gym with the same dedication he had shown to Master Rodolfo. The old caretaker, now officially the general supervisor, firmly held the champion's hand with his free hand, the other supported by the cane that symbolized his new phase. The tears that ran down their faces were of gratitude, fulfillment, and the certainty that Rodolfo's memory would continue to live through each young person who crossed those renovated doors.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.